Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the WECT Digital Studio. My name is Pachilis, and joining me today is the one and only Reggie Watts. Reggie, thank you so much for joining me today, man.
My total pleasure, man.
Man, so I'm so happy to talk to you. This week of all weeks, you'll be at the Cucalorus Film Festival in town. And you know what? We'll get to that in a second. But at first, I think we need to take it back to the beginning, because for the past couple days, I have been reading your autobiography, Great
Oh,
Falls,
sick. Well,
Montana. Yeah, Great Falls, Montana, Fast Times, Post Punk Weirdos, and a Tale of Coming Home. And well, you know what? To be honest, right off the front, I have not read your book. I've listened to your book through audiobook.
yeah.
And I was wondering, is it in 2025, is there still a stigma to saying that I listened to a book instead of read a book? And as you who actually did both, you did the audio version and wrote it as an author, do you have a preference of which way you want your audience to experience your story?
Um, that's excuse me. It always chokes me up to talk about that. No, uh, I don't, I don't know. I mean, because I personally listen to, I listen to books personally. Like I don't think I've actually sat down and read a book in, I don't know, decades. But I think I don't know. Some people like to hear the person's voice, reading it. I just know that when I did read it, it was like, it's a lot to read. And the process was pretty like, it just felt like a mountain to climb. And so so I'm not even sure of the quality of it, but I've heard people they do enjoy listening to it. But I think it just comes down to personal preference. I think if you like the book, if you're a reader and you read the book, then maybe you might want to hear it. Oh, I'll hear it again, but I'll hear it from the narrators, the author narrating it. Um, but no, I don't really have a preference. They're both like kind of like they're both abstract concepts at this point. It's like, did I write that? Did I narrate that? I don't remember. Crazy.
Well, it was pretty cool for you, especially because you'll actually like do voices here and there. And like one of the things I found cool was when you're telling that story of like how you and one of your childhood friends used to like be in a band and do cassette recordings, and you actually played a cassette recording from like the early '80s or like late '80s, early '90s, and it was cool to be able to experience that. Something I would have missed out on if I had just picked up the book.
Oh yeah, that's true. Right, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Well, the book does have QR codes in it that you scan, and then it leads you to that media. So
yeah.
that's kind of interesting.
We're really living in the future.
I
Man,
tried.
man, but like one of the things that stood out to me about your story and like your childhood growing up is that you talk about moving to this small town of Great Falls, Montana, and being the new kid in town, and not only new kid in town, but an immigrant into this country. And what I found so interesting about your story is how I feel like most kids at that age would want to not draw attention to themselves or would want to like blend in. And you were the opposite. You wanted to like stand out and like be like a focal point. And I was wondering like, not to be like, diagnose yourself like child psychology wise, but like I wonder why do you think that is? And I don't know, like what advice would you give to kids that are probably feeling, to get them out of their shell and say like, no, don't do that, be your true self. What advice would you have for the youths out there, as it would be?
Do you it? Um, well, I would say, I think the biggest thing when you're growing up, especially, I don't know, growing up these days, I imagine at least until age 5 probably is pretty similar-ish, to at least my generation growing up. I hope. But I would say, like when you're in school, it's really an opportunity to figure out who you are. And hopefully you have parents that are encouraging, hopefully parents are encouraging their kids to have the confidence to know that they are loved and that they are, um, and that they are a person that is special and, within themselves, and that, that they're supported to be who they are. And and obviously not everybody gets that, but for kids out there, the important thing is to discover who you are and to discover, to be joyful, to be happy about who you are. And it's not always going to be easy, of course, but I think when you hold on, when you love yourself and you like love being with yourself and you love being with your friends, and you've got friends that reflect that, I think that's the important thing. And not again, not every kid's going to do that. Some kids feel alienated and stuff like that, but hopefully there's a kid like I was the kid that would always try to find the kid that was alienated and try to make friends with them. Hopefully there's someone like that for them. But yeah, it's really just about, you know, feeling like you can be who you are.
Yeah. I know, sadly, I know like a lot of comedians, even though they're making us, laugh their entire lives, they, battle with depression or self doubt or like self loathing. And I was wondering, like, you know, do you how was that journey for you? I mean, did you even have that journey? Was it like, I mean, when you talk about loving yourself, like, have you, been accepted and loved yourself for who you are at that young age, or well, was it a process? Was it a journey for you as you grew into adulthood?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it was always, I mean, I was an only child, so because of that, I really got a lot of time to spend on my own and had a big imagination. So I was lucky to kind of be able to entertain myself with the things I was curious with. And I think that, I don't know, there was always something about myself that I could not be who I was. And and I feel lucky in that way, because as I grew up and wherever I moved, that that I had that sense with me. So if I met new people, I still had a strong kind of inner drive to be who I was. So really, like wherever I moved, it just strengthened my resolve, my self resolve everywhere, that I would go, no matter what the situation was.
Okay.
Mhm.
Jumping forward to the way I first found you was through Comedy Bang Bang, and speaking of like the title of your book, Misfits and Weirdos, and I felt like it was such like knowing your style of comedy and like hearing your story and like getting to know you through your audiobook. I felt like that was such a great pairing for you
Mm.
to be a part of Comedy Bang Bang and IFC as, a channel at that time, like hosting like the Independent Spirit Awards, having shows like Comedy Bang Bang or Portlandia and like Brockmire. I want to say that their tagline at the time was slightly off, and it kind of like
Oh
fits your
yeah.
vibe like perfectly. And I was wondering, like, how did you get in contact with those guys, like, Comedy Bang Bang, and like what was it like being in that that era of IFC?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it was, it felt like a nice, like, golden heyday. And luckily I've been involved with that, in many, many ways. Um, like, meaning that I seem to arrive at places just when there's like a little golden window, of opportunity, whether it was like early TBS, running, it was a super deluxe, it was like uh, it tended to be a viral video site, in the early days of viral videos. Um, and getting to getting to do shows and get money for, doing a bunch of shows for this, experimental network. And, and IFC was, moving in that direction as well, and being kind of unconventional. But really, it was Scott Ackerman who really made everything, happen on that level, and I got to be along for the ride, and which is usually how I like to do it. I like it when someone's done the heavy work, and I get to just step in and be who I am. And they were cool about me being who I was, but it was, yeah, I mean, it was amazing. It was, to be exposed to all of those people that they brought in. They brought in such huge stars. It was incredible. But it also taught me that all these huge all these huge stars, they came to the show because they were part of a community. And that community were the people that verified, if they're like, should I be on the show? They're like, yeah, it's a blast. It's awesome. Scott Ackerman, he's done this and this, and people most of the time said yes if they could get their schedules to work. So, um, so it was a good learning opportunity, and Scott was very generous with me.
Were you able to like stretch your or flex your muscles like creatively? Like I know like during your time in Seattle, you did like some improv comedy, and I was wondering when your time on Comedy Bang Bang. I mean, I would assume that you're writing a lot of your like musical things, but like, are you also in the writers' room like pitching like sketches ideas or helping like flesh the episodes as they come to be?
Um, no, no, I was never
Okay.
in the writer's room. I am kind of allergic to a writer's room. I mean,
Why is that?
I, well, because I don't know, writers are an interesting creature to me. Like for me, as an improviser, I think it's not my go-to to be like, I need to work with writers. I'm just improvise. When I'm improvising, I'm just working with nothing, and then I'm making something from nothing. So I'm comfortable doing that, and I'm also comfortable doing that with other people that work that way. Um, but when it comes to structuring a show and writing it, um, if it were my own project, like I've done experimental theater, and I worked with an amazing writer, Tommy Smith, an amazing playwright, and that was incredible to work with a writer and to have like a teamwork thing where I'm spewing these crazy, whatever, random ideas, and this person's formatting those ideas. That makes sense to me. But walking into a room with like 7, 8 writers, and you're like the head writer, that it was a culture that I was not, very alien to me and very scary to me. So I just stayed away from the writers' room because it was too weird. And but they produced incredible results. So I was just on the outside. They knew I was an improviser, so they would leave room for me to do what I needed to do. And I definitely had lines, but they made sure that they weren't like too complicated because I have a phobia of memorizing lines.
Okay. I mean, you do like so many things. You work in comedy, you work in music, and some people might not be able to relate to that, but I feel like something that we can all relate to is big life changes, big career changes, and I want to talk to you about, the decision to leave Comedy Bang Bang, before it was over and move over to the Late Late Show with James Corden, and like what factors went into like making that decision, and like how difficult it was, or like what was on your mind at the time at that point in your life.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, the one thing I am grateful for is that I do have a sense of like I will always choose the vibes. Like I guess I could say like I'm vibes first whenever I'm doing things. And I think with Comedy Bang Bang, because it was when we filmed, it was so compact. We had like a month or month and a half to like, shoot a whole season.
Hmm.
And the season had a lot of moving parts, and it was very guest reliant, so the schedule was constantly shifting. So if Paul Rudd didn't come in, because he got a movie or something, we had to like shift everything around, so the schedule was always changing. It was very uncertain, which to me is fine, to an extent. But what ended up happening is there was just a lot of waiting around on set, and or I would get up early, which I hated doing, which is like such, when I say that to my acting friends who like work all the time, they're just like, that's part of the gig, you just wake up early. Sometimes they're waking up at 4 a.m., for a call time at 5 a.m. But for me it's like waking up early all the time and then sitting around and waiting around for me to go on. I started to get grumpy, and because I love efficiency, and oftentimes I would be looking at the filming process or the production process, and I'd be like, man, if this were my show, I would just shoot this thing once and then move on. And like, I don't know. I just started getting grumpy because I didn't feel like I was being utilized, very efficiently, and I was just waiting around all the time. And that I don't like feeling grumpy on set. I like feeling I love being in a good mood, and I love contributing to an air of ease, on set. And I was starting to lose that a little bit, and that was scary to me. I didn't want to, you know. get into that zone. And so that's why I decided to leave the show. And then they at first they were like, okay, well we can get somebody else, but can you stay on like, 10 episodes, which is like half a season? And I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. And so it worked out. And then the Late Late Show, I didn't leave Comedy Bang Bang for the Late Late Show. It's like I stopped Comedy Bang Bang, and then weirdly, like weeks before I was going to go back to New York, because Comedy Bang Bang shot in Los Angeles, I got a call to meet with this James Corden. So it was just funny. It's like I couldn't leave the talk show format. It's like I tried leaving, and then like another talk show, a real talk show, it was like, would you like to be a real band leader? So yeah, that's kind of like why I loved everybody. I mean, I'm still good friends with everybody, and Scott, and I felt bad for kind of throwing that at them, but I just needed to do it for my own well-being.
But no, I mean, again, super relatable. Like when you talk about that, that feeling, and that leads us to make those like big life changes. It's something we can all relate to. And in fact, it actually corresponded with one of my big life changes. Like me and my wife, we both work here at this station in Wilmington, but we had some similar feelings at the time in I want to say it was like around like 2015, 2016, and we ended up moving to a sister station in Charleston. And here we're an NBC affiliate, but in Charleston it's CBS, and it was right around the changing of the guard where Colbert was coming to late night, Late Late Show was kicking off, and it was such an exciting time because like I loved TV. I loved the history of network television, and it's unfortunate to see it on the decline as the years go on. And CBS is this major powerhouse, but it always tended to skew older age-wise. So like to see this, bringing in Colbert, bringing in James Corden, and having you as his band leader, you be his like Ed McMahon, and I was just
Yeah.
like, it was such an exciting time. And that's how I was when I was telling people that I was interviewing you. People my age, I would be like, I'm reading Reggie Watts, Comedy Bang Bang. But then if I was to tell my mom, I was just like, James Corden, the guy who did Carpool Karaoke, yeah, I would, because, the
Yeah,
CBS
yeah.
demographic, I would have to
Right.
explain to them. But, like, when I do that, they know who you are. So, like, do you see that when you perform at your shows? Do you have a wide demographic of people that show up to your audience because of the projects you've selected? I mean, Comedy Bang Bang alone and, Late Late Show.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my thing is like really the only demographic that I worry about, not worry about, but the demographic that I like to see at my shows, that I like to see younger people at my shows, because my I always say that what I'm performing for, who I'm performing for, where I'm coming from when I'm performing is from that misfit weirdo kid in the back of the class, that's doodling on paper, like drawing starships, or or like is into like fantasy novels and science fiction, whatever, or Wicca, or just like whoever is like in the back doing their thing that doesn't feel like they quite fit in. Um, that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so if that appeals to that, whatever version of that and whatever generation that is, that's who I'm kind of drawing from. I think that then I'm if I'm doing that well, then everything falls in line with all the other generations, because I'm Gen X, so like Gen X people will know me because I've been around long enough, for Gen X. And so yeah, so at my shows, it's cool. Like I'll have families showing up now, where it's just like their young kid is with them, and the parents brought them, or the kid brought their parents, and that means a lot to me, because it means that whatever I'm doing, I'm doing right. So, and yeah, being on the Late Late Show definitely broadens the identity to more people. I don't necessarily notice like, oh, my audience is this or that, but the thing that definitely always matters most is like, are there young people in the audience?
Okay. And like with the state of late night TV in 2025, between the Colbert cancellation, between the Kimmel censorship, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask what your thoughts are about all these things that have transpired, and where do you see the traditional late night talk show format going within the next 5 to 10 years, let's say?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, when I was on the show, especially the last 3 years of the show, we all felt like things were changing. Like I felt like, I mean, like as I've always felt generally, yeah, I guess the feeling was that things are changing because of the internet, and I saw shows kind of capitulating to a certain extent to like making sure that there was like bite-size content, and like chopping things up and making sure that it's available on all the social media platforms, things of that nature. And when I started seeing that, I was like, well, there's something going on already, where shows are trying to find relevance online and so forth. And then I kind of thought to myself, I was like, I think talk shows are kind of on their way out. Like I don't see them continuing in this traditional format. And then sure enough, we left, and then, which I think was the exact perfect time for the Late Late Show to leave. I was so happy that the producers had really, really good sense about that. Um, and I was ready too at that point too. So when we heard the news about that, and we had a year left, I was like, yeah, I think this is what's going to happen. I think we're going to leave, and then we're going to start seeing like shows winding down. um all that to say that I think that it just moves into another format. I think you and I were talking about podcasts before this, and before we started recording this, and I think that podcasts kind of serve a format to that. I think that we're going to start seeing a return of, I think talk shows are just going to reformat themselves. I think we're going to see, there's like independent networks now, like Means TV and Dropout and so forth, that have elements of what old networks used to have, and I think that they're going to kind of take on some of those old formats and put them into their programming, and we're going to see kind of a rejuvenated version of a talk show. And podcasts are definitely on that edge anyways. When we say podcast, and we were talking about how it feels, I'm kind of slightly allergic to that term. um, but podcasts are essentially just like, they're video formatted now. So you've got like this, it's a video podcast, but what is a podcast? Like, we're just kind of naming formats, but essentially it's just people talking to each other. So I think we're going to see some hybridization, more hybridization, and new forms of people talking to each other. And maybe there'll be bands, there'll be music, like a talk show. I don't know. I just think like it's changing and it's morphing. I don't think anything ever truly dies. But I think the idea of like Johnny Carson, that big talk show format, that is probably not going to be around for too much longer.
Yeah, I mean, so I work like the overnight shift here, and
Heck.
my go to is still Seth, late night with Seth Meyers, and that also corresponds with like my age, where like when I was in college, he was the head writer of SNL, so I really connect with those seasons of SNL, and I still feel some of that in his show to this day. But it's kind of hard to explain to like like a younger generation that doesn't want to sit down and watch it, because the whole idea of like the talk show format from like the old days of TV is that it was the only chance that you had to see the stars that you idolize in movies and TV speak for themselves and be them true selves. Like now you don't
True.
need that anymore, because you could just follow them on Instagram, or see them do an episode of like Hot Ones on YouTube. And it's like you
Right.
said with, yeah, and it's like with the bite side content. It's like talk shows are literally like the in between space, where it's like now we need the extremes, where it's just like you either are just watching clips of Seth or clips of Jimmy that are TikTok with captions embedded, and it's like 60 seconds, or you are sitting down to watch a like 2 hour podcast of like just two people in a room talking with no frills. And it's like it's all about the extremes now, where it's like the traditional talk show format is almost like it doesn't serve an audience anymore. It feels like.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, Well, I would say this. I'd say that those shows still have live audiences,
Hmm.
so the live component still exists. So the live experience of being on a talk show hasn't changed. That won't change. If there's a live audience, then that'll always be there. I think what's changed is that there's not a unified viewing time. Like
Yeah.
that's narrowing. Like we have these networks that do broadcast. Broadcast, and then we're like the internet. It's streaming. It's like really, it's not really, they're not really that different. When people talk about like the internet, it's different. Than it's like not. It's just broadcast. You're just talking about broadcasting technology.
Yeah.
So it's a difference now of like timing. Like before we just had a few networks to choose from. In the '80s, you sit down to dinner and you're just like, we're watching CBS tonight, or watching that show on ABC, or you
Yeah.
know, um, and people don't really do that as much anymore. And even when they're watching their second screening, or a third screening, or or whatever.
Yeah.
um and I think that's changed. So yeah, like you said, it's kind of fragmented. We see clips. A lot of time I don't watch whole talk shows. I only see clips. I see the interview of whoever's on, and you know so it's an interesting it's interesting. It just gets chopped up, and the timing changes, but it's still a whole show,
Yeah.
between live and bits.
Yeah. And it's like I was having a conversation the other day where, like we're not talking about linear TV anymore. So it's like, yes, you're not competing for, time slots and everything, but you are still competing for people's time. Like you said, you don't have
Yes.
time anymore to watch a full show. It's just like there's so much content thrown at you from like all corners of the earth that you still have to like fight for people's time because there's only 24 hours in the day.
Yeah. Yes. Sure.
But before we like leave late night completely, I did want to ask like, well, like when Jimmy first started on Fallon started on late night and he announced that, like he had the Roots as his house band. I'm like, oh man, that's so crazy. But I'm like, that'll probably only be for like a year, right? Like they would never want to just stay as his house band. But then I was just like, well, no, it's got to be the best gift in the world for a musician to just have the greatest talents, past, present, and future, just brought to your doorstep, and you could collaborate with them and like jam with them and just like pick their brains about stuff. And was that your experience on the Late Late Show? Like, do you have like fond memories or like great stories to tell about musicians that you've met over the years?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, I met so many amazing people. I met I became friends with Paramore, the band Paramore, from because they played on there, and I was like, oh my God, these guys. I didn't know who they were, and they played, and I was like, because there weren't that many bands. All the music that we came through there really, not there's no shade or anything like to the musicians that were on there, but a lot of it was like what I would call like corporate music. It's like music that's kind of, you can feel it was installed, in the system, and because when they play, you're like, are you even present? Are you even there while you're playing? And there's
Mm-hmm.
someone backstage pressing space, but we in the band and I used to call it space bar music, where someone would be in the back just hitting space bar, and the playback was rolling, and then there were musicians playing on top of it, or acting like they were playing on top of it, but it was just a
Mm-hmm.
playback. And so so there was a lot of like, I'm just promoting my thing because I need to promote it, which I get, but at the same time, I'm like, you're a musician, why don't you just play your song live?
Mm-hmm.
Here's an opportunity for you to show off your talents. Anyways, that to be said, there were very few bands that were on where I was like, oh shit, this band is for real. So I made friends with Paramore. They played everything live. There was no backing. Yeah, it was all live, and they were all like sick musicians. And Haley Williams is like one of the best vocalists around. So I immediately was like, holy drawn to them. I was drawn to the Voids when they came through, which is Julian Casablancas's um, other band besides the Strokes, and I became friends with them, and Julian, and there were a few other bands, but not that many, like maybe five or six bands that I was like, oh, those guys are great. The rest of the bands were nice people, but not really that interesting, and so but because of that, I made friends with them. And then, and then certain guests would like come up after their segment on the couch. They would come up to me to the bandstand to say hi. And I became friends with a bunch of people. What's her name? Maya Hawk, came up, she was in Stranger Things or whatever, but she came up to say hi. And it's like, oh, that's so great. And we chatted. And then Dan Stevens, who was on Legion and a bunch of other movies and things like that. Like he came up to say hi, and we hit it off. And Benedict Cumberbatch, it's like it was just like there were people that would want to meet me, and I
Hmm.
would meet them, and and say hi or whatever, because we were both curious about each other. So yeah, it was definitely an honor and an opportunity to have that huge flow of people running through the system. And I'm like, wow, I get to see all these legends. Mel Brooks came and did a bit, so yeah, I mean, that was super exciting.
Man, we were talking like briefly about like how things kind of just work out in the world, kind of like these cosmic like it was just meant to be type thing. It is crazy to me that you name dropped Paramore because my wife is going to freak out. Like that is her number one go to like fangirl band is Paramore and Haley Williams in particular. She left work early the other day to pick up like her vinyl from like a local record shop.
Oh,
Hopefully that doesn't get her
wow.
in trouble for if anyone if
Wow.
management's listening to this. But yeah,
Oh man,
so there's
that's
that,
great.
and then get this, not only that, but like an hour ago, sometimes she'll leave her computer and I'll play a prank on her and I'll change her desktop background. And
Yeah.
I swear, an hour ago, I changed her desktop background to the CD cover of Ashley Simpson's Pieces of Me, infamously
What?
known for lip syncing on SNL. So you
Oh my
see,
gosh, that's
it all comes
crazy.
together. Like, how crazy is that?
Whoa, whoa, that's yeah, wow, yeah, synchronicity, or what they
Right?
would call in the physics community a quantum anomaly. Yeah.
Mm. I do. Again, I work the late night shift. On my way to work, I do throw on Neil deGrasse Tyson's Star Talk podcast. So
Oh man.
that definitely sounds like something he would say.
Oh man, for sure. If you get a chance, like if any of you and your get followers, guests, who knows, users,
Mhm.
I'm a user. What a great term for somebody. But yeah, check out digital physics. It's a really cool branch of physics that talks about these types of things, like these synchronicities or whatever. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Okay, I will definitely take that suggestion, and I will have a
Hmm.
couple more suggestions for you as we go forward.
Yeah.
First, I'm going to do a little audio test, and I want to see if you can hear when if hear a beat when I start playing this.
Okay.
Do you hear anything?
Uh-huh. I do.
You do? Okay. So I'm going to
I do.
restart this and get it ready to go. This is going to
And
be
just so you
like
know, I got 5 minutes. So yeah, yeah. Just so you know.
okay. Oh, that's
Yeah,
fine.
no worries. Cool.
Um, okay. Well, switching gears completely, I was just going to want to talk about
Yeah.
well, I'm going to play a video for you, and this is
Okay.
from a group called Kinda Funny, and this is one of their creators, and his vibes and music style kind of remind me of you, so I'm just going to play it for you
Okay.
real quick and get your thoughts on it.
Okay.
So they are a video game outlet, and he was working on this during, putting together their top 10 of the year type of list.
One,
And
two, three, four. We all love gaming. Time to get a high score. Next is five, and then it's six. So many great games. Time to build this list. Up next is the number seven. When you're ranking games, you gotta ask yourself one question. When my top 10 is done, I won't need a defender. 8, 9. Is this game a contender? Contender. If your list is bad, return to sender. Contender. Contender.
that's all.
I'm a 12-year GameStop Power Up Rewards member. Contender.
So I just wanted to play
That's
that for
sick.
you. And the reason I did was I wanted to get your thoughts on, what do you think of like this generation's ability to, when I hear you talk about your childhood and like being able to experiment, like what do you think of the amount of tools kids have today and the amount of platforms they have where it's like it's easy for someone to like just like throw a beat together and do this weird offbeat type of humor thing and get it out to like a huge following, like what are your thoughts on like what we're seeing from like again we talk about terms we don't really a fan of. I'm not really a fan of content as a term, but like for lack of a better
Yeah.
word, content creators, like where do you like what do you think of this like current generation, and like are you like out there like finding people, discovering people on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredible now. I mean, you can literally make anything you want at any given time. And you have all the tools. You have a whole, if you want to create an animated thing, you can do an animated thing. If you want to do anything, any type of media, any form, you can do it. And now that AI is here, it's like obviously there's like egregious uses of it and like dumb uses of it, but some people use it really well as a, like a little enhancement tool, and that it does some heavy lifting and stuff like that. But there just my point is that there are so many technological tools to be able to create what you want to create. And yeah, and you're seeing it, that it's obviously we have like a glut now, of like how many things we have access to, and what can we can see. But there's definitely no limit anymore, to what can be done. It now it's just a matter of focus, like having a vision and executing it without getting lost in how many options that you have. But I think that it is an amazing time. I think, obviously there are certain powers that be that want to like shut down the internet and kind of control it, like age verification, all that stuff, and really make it this encrypted whatever, uh, kind of like gated, tiered thing or whatever. I don't think that that will succeed because I think the freedom of creativity will always win in the end. But we'll always figure out other ways to transmit. But I think in general, the fact that we do have so many tools available to us is fucking amazing. Or sorry, excuse me, excuse my French, but yeah, just like we're just really amazing because I, it's like I love seeing creativity in action, and I love people seeing doing what they love. So yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to showcase them because I felt like that style. I feel like is only possible in this internet age
Oh
of like stuff that's like you don't want to say purposefully bad, but purposefully offbeat,
yeah,
and like something's off about this, and that's where the humor comes from. I love that we're in that age.
totally. Well, yeah, yeah, it's great. It's like we have so many examples of, people emulating the awkwardness of,
Yes. Oh yeah.
things, or, knowing that it's kind of weird and they're just going for it, and there's so many examples of it. So some people are doing like meta versions. There's like 3 layers of meta on top of, what they do. But yeah, I mean, what that was like fantastic,
Yeah.
because like he obviously knows where he's coming from, and knows who he's speaking to, and like I get it,
Yeah. And then before we go, I do want to like you are performing at the Cucalorus Film Festival in Wilmington, North Carolina this weekend. The question or the last thing I want to ask you about is you do such a great job in your book about painting a picture of your childhood and, Montana specifically and your friends are a perfect cast of characters. And I like wonder, have you ever thought about, putting pen to paper and maybe creating like a TV show about because you really and you mentioned like John Hughes like being a huge like influence on you and the way you tell your adolescence is so heartwarming and it's so vivid and I wondered like is that something you think about like maybe telling your story in a TV show or we're at an independent film festival maybe an independent
Mhm.
film.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm glad you asked that. I mean, yeah, for sure. I've been thinking about it a lot, and there's been a lot of talk about it, the people trying to like option the book as a movie and, all these things. And um, I think, at this point, especially like the industry is changing very quickly. And, the idea of like getting something done in a traditional way is not necessarily, not only is it not necessarily viable, it also is limiting because, for me, it's like I end up just waiting around for like management and agents to be like, we're talking to so and so and they might do it. And we're talking to so and so and they might do it. And here's a meeting, here's a pitch meeting, and then I pitch it and I can just tell I'm like, they're not gonna want to do that, and because it's not even about like at this point these days, it's not really about like, do they like the project? It's about what is the network, what's the mandate for the network, what are they looking for, they're looking at your social media and going like, does that hit the graph, the demographics and blah blah. So I think, well, to answer your question, it's like, yeah, I definitely want to represent those stories, and there's so many ways to do that, and I think, probably in the next year or two I'm going to be looking for a way to do that, whether, a network is behind it or not. And so and I think it'll be probably a direct to fans, situation where I go, here's an idea for a thing. Like, let's say I want to shoot a scene from the book, that happened and
Yeah.
make it just that. And then I just go, hey, do you guys want to see this? If you do, then donate. And here's how much we think it'll cost. And if they get there, then we're like, okay, great. Now I'm going to go to Great Falls, Montana. I'm going to shoot that scene, and you're going to see it, and then maybe that'll attract attention. Who knows? But yes, I mean the idea is I would love to represent some of those things that happened, either in little bits or in its entirety.
Yeah, I definitely think independent route would be the best way to go. Don't get involved in the streaming wars and the corporate mergers that are out there that will
No.
have you endlessly waiting. And
Oh
again,
my
like the way
God.
that you describe like the Montana sky, like it specifically reminds me of like Terrence Malick, or like specifically like Tree of Life, or specifically he did a movie called To the Wonder, which was set in Oklahoma, but that's still like that Terrence Malick style of just like wide open landscapes, and like you're engulfed like in this like
Yeah.
sky that's present over everything, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful, and it needs to be on film. I really feel, because like how many people
Oh,
would never need to be exposed, like what shows or movies are being filmed in Montana, so I feel like you got to represent.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, 100%. I would definitely film in Montana too. That's a non-starter for me because the light there is insane. It looks so good.
Awesome. Man, well, Reggie Watts, I don't want to keep you any longer than I need to. I know you got a plane to catch,
I do.
one of many. I think I've caught you in like the middle of like a layover in a way, but I appreciate you so much for your time. Reggie Wilson at performing at the Wilson Center Sunday, November 23rd at 7 p.m., closing out the 2025 Cucalorus Film Festival. Reggie Watts, thank you so much for joining me today, man.
Man, it's an absolute pleasure, man. I love talking to you. Yeah, are you coming to the show?
Man, the logistics when you have a 7-year-old child.
Oh, right. I felt it as you were starting to say, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
but I would love to. I feel like you are really going to enjoy it. I don't know if you are going to have time to check out like any films or anything.
Yeah.
Years ago when I did go, I was lucky enough to see Mark Duplas's Creep debut,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
a Q&A with Matt Walsh, and they did this great thing where they were right on the river, and on the riverfront they projected a screening of Flash Gordon, and
Oh my
it was one of
gosh.
the best
Wow.
movie experiences of my life. I was one of only like 7 people there because it was like freezing
I
cold,
love it.
and they don't do
Love
it
it.
anymore. But hey, if anyone from
Yeah.
Cucalorus is watching this, bring back the campy Riverwatch features, because I enjoyed them and they were a great time.
Sick.
But yes, Reggie, thank you so much for joining me. And from the WECD Digital Studio, this is Scott Pachilis signing off.
You be chilling.